Vanakkam. Hello friends. In the previous episode, we saw about Thondaiman Izhanthirayan, the hero of Sirupaanatrupadai. Thondaiman, an abbreviation from the word Thondayar Mahan, meaning the son of the soil. He ruled from Kanchipuram, the ancient Kachimudur, as his capital. In this episode, which I am happy to share, marks the 100th episode in the journey of Know Your Roots. We will travel with the Sangam poet Nattatanar and unravel the history of Voima Nalliyakodan, the hero of Sirupaanatrupadai, composed as a long poem of 269 verses by Idaikari Kattu Nallur Nattatanar, where Idaikari Nadu fell in the Maduranthakam taluk of Chengalpattu district, comprising the salt pans along the seashore. Today it goes by the name Edakkadu, and the poet hailed from a province called Nallur. The noted Tamil scholar Kamil Zwellable assigns a time period between the late 3rd century Common Era and early 4th century Common Era to the Sirupaanatrupadai. Atrupadai, a unique genre of Tamil poems defined in the Tolgapiyam as Kootarum Panarum Purunarum Viraliyum ஆட்டிடை காட்சி உருளத் தோன்றி பெற்ற பெருவளம் பெறார்க்கு அறிவுரியி சென்ற பயன் எதிரச் சொன்ன பக்கமும். Here, Koothar were the storytellers who enacted stories through song and dance akin to the Terukuthu that we see today. Panar were the bards who sang the Isaipanar, and those who played the lute were the Yalpanar. Porunar were associated with playing the parai and singing war poetry, and Viraliyar were the ladies who sang and danced and entertained the audience. 5 out of the 10 Pathupattu works fall under the genre of Atrupadai. Porunaraatrupadai by Mudathama on Karihala Soran, Perumbaanatrupadai by Kadilur Urthirankannanar on Thondaiman Izhanthirayan, Kootharaatrupadai, also known as Malaipadukadam on Nannan Sei Nannan, all of which we have seen in earlier episodes, and of course the Sirupaanatrupadai. Now, while all these 4 guided a bard to a patron king or chieftain, the 5th work by Nakirar, known as Tirumurugatrupadai, guides a devotee towards Lord Muruga. A much later work, for the first time, the concept of the Arupadai Veedu, the 6 holy abodes of Lord Muruga, is shown here by Nakirar, complete with Vedic mythology. An interesting take on the name usage of the Tirumurugatrupadai is given by K.N. Sivarajapillai in his The Chronology of the Early Tamils, where the conventional naming of these guidance poems goes as such: Porunaraatrupadai guiding the Porunar, Panaraatrupadai guiding the Panar, and Kootharaatrupadai guiding the Koothar. Going by the same naming convention, Murugatrupadai should be guiding Lord Muruga towards his devotees. Now, we have seen in detail how this ancient Muruga deity was a kind of spirit deity of the Tamil people whose origins could be traced to the Indus Valley civilization. I will leave the relevant links here, and KNS gives a line from the Agananuru that goes, Murugu aatru padutha urugelu nadunal. Here, the phrase means, as it should, a priest guiding the formless Muruga deity to the heroine's house for worship. KNS claims that Sangam poets would never break with convention. That Nakirar does it testifies to the lateness of the very work itself. Kamil Zwellable assigns a date later to the 6th century Common Era for the Tirumurugatrupadai. Zwellable also points out that this Nakirar was definitely different than the Nakirar who composed the Nedunalvadai, supposedly on Pandian Nedunjezhiyan, somewhere in the 2nd century Common Era. In the Sirupaanatrupadai, Nattatanar sings of a bard guiding the other bards to the generous chieftain Nalliyakodan. Nalliyakodan, the hero, ruled from Voima Nadu. In his Pathupattu Araichi, the Tamil scholar and historian Dr. Rajamanikanaar shows inscriptional evidence that helps establish this territory. lying between the Solanadu and Tondainadu in what is today Dindivanam district, going up to a region called Maavilangai in the north, Maladu in the west, with the Bay of Bengal forming its eastern boundary. Nalliyakodan belonged to the Oviyar clan. தொல்மா இலங்கை கருவோடு பெயரிய நல்மா இலங்கை மன்னருள்ளும் மறு இன்றி விளங்கிய வடு இல் வாய்வாள் உருபுலித் துப்பின் ஓவியர் பெருமகன் go the lines in the Sirupaanatrupadai. In his Maavilangai city that carries the name of the ancient and famous Ilangai, that is today's Sri Lanka, born of the Oviyar clan, he is a brave warrior who fought like a tiger, sings Nattatanar. Avai Duraisamy Pillai claims that the term Oviyar Ma Nadu became Oima Nadu in the long run, whereas there is another interesting meaning given to this name, where the word O stood for the wooden planks that were used to control water in a sluice gate. A line in the Kootharaatruppadai that gives the context goes, துணை செலல் தலைவாய் ஓ இறந்து வரிக்கும் காடுனர் வயாம்கட்கு இன் சேயாறு. ஓய்மாநாடு itself is described as பொரு புனல் தருவும், meaning a land with a lot of water bodies. So, it is suggested that ஓக்கள் நிரம்ப இருந்த நாடு ஓய்மா நாடு, a land with a lot of sluice gates. The description of Maavilangai, the capital city, as a namesake of the ancient Ilangai is quite interesting, and the poet describes Karuvodu Peyariya, meaning that the capital city got its name at the time when it was founded. Now, was this a carried forward memory brought from a distant land? The Oviyar clan formed part of the Naga tribes, and the Naga tribes also ruled over parts of northern Sri Lanka. At a later date, a lot of mythology rose around the Naga clan that are detailed by Kanahasabai Pillai in his work, The Tamils 1800 Years Ago. Well, we will not be able to go into it in detail here, but definitely there was a strong connect. And we also know that one of the northern provinces of Sri Lanka goes by the name Yalpanam. And the story goes that a king who ruled those regions gifted territories to the Panar who sang with the Yal, the lute, and hence the name Yalpanam, a continuum of Tamil culture across the seas. Sirupaanatrupadai translates to the guide for small lute bards, meaning that these bards should have been playing the small Sengotiyal, which had 7 strings. Ponvar Tanna Puriyadangu Narambin Inkural Siriyal Idavain Taliyi go the lines, showing that the bard carried and kept the Siriyal, the small lute, to his left side and played on its strings, where the stretched strings appeared as if they were made of gold. Naivalam Palaniya Nayanteri Palai Kaival Panmahan Kadandarindu Iyakka. In a perfect manner, he plays the pun of Naivalam Iyanga Vayyattu Valliyor Nasai துணிகூர் எவ்வமோடு துயராற்று படுப்ப முனிவு இகந்து இருந்த முதுவாய் இரவல. O wise man with sorrow, not finding donors in this world, listen to me. Your stress of walking has ended. Panar are those who sang the pan isai, where pan meant a musical note that was the equivalent of the ragas in today's Carnatic music system. Naivalam Palaniya Nayanteri Palai, where Naivalam was a minor note under a major note, that is the Palai pan, which could be equated to today's Melagartha ragas in the Carnatic music. The Pingala Nihandu details 103 major puns, and there were thousands of smaller or minor notes as well, most of which have been lost to us. Today, we are familiar with just 24 puns that are used in the conventional singing of the devotional body of hymns known as the Thevaram. The Tamil Pannisai was the foundation on which Carnatic music system was built. This, of course, cannot be elaborated here. There are descriptions of different kinds of stringed instruments and even a mention of musical books. Amirdu Podindu Ilitrum Adangupuri Narambin, sing perfectly in all the thurais, strum your lute that produces very sweet music, Noolneri Marabin Panni Aanadu, and sing well in the manner prescribed by the books. In another verse, Nattatanar sings, Yema intunai taliyi irahu ularndu kamaru tumbi kamaram seppum. These lines talk about a male dragonfly singing the kamaram pan, another tune, to attract the female dragonflies. What a quaint imagination. Now this line reminds us of a very famous poem from the Kurundogai composed by Irayanar, Kongudher Vaalkai Amsirai Tumbi Kamam Seppadu Kandadu Molimo, made very famous by the movie Thiruvilayadal. This particular line, Kamam Seppadu Kandadu Molimo, should mean the poet addressing the dragonfly to stop singing the Sihambaram pun and mention what it observed. But later commentaries gave a different meaning, taking kamam as a desire or likeness, while in my opinion, it should have denoted the Sihambaram pun. In the opening lines of Sirupaanatrupadai, Nattatanar gives a very beautiful description of Mother Earth. Manimalai panaithol manila madandai, animulai tuyal varuvum aaram pola, Sel punal ulanda sevaral kanyatru. The wide land as Mother Earth has sapphire-yielding mountains for breasts and bamboo for arms. Like a swaying pearl strand on her beautiful breasts, forest streams come from afar, cascading down from both sides of the mountains and joining together, causing distress to the trees on the riverbanks. Nattatanar sings the fame of all the 7 great patrons, the Kadayelu Vallalgal, and then adds that now that they were all gone, the task of patronizing the bards left behind by them fell on the able shoulders of Nalliyakodan. Eluvar Punda Ihai Chennuham, Virikadal Veli Vielaham Viranga, Orutan Tangiya Uranudai Nontal. Here, the word Sennuham meant the crosswood that was kept on the necks of a bullock that was pulling the bullock cart. So, such is the burden on Nalliyakodan, which he carries with aplomb and generosity, the poet sings. Nattatanar also describes the kingdoms of the great 3, the Cheras, the Cholas and the Pandyas, which means he must have travelled widely, and he also makes a note of how the 3 kingdoms were not as prosperous as before, and their rulers were not in a position to be even as generous as Nalliyakodan. Well, this was perhaps an indication of the changing times and the impending fate of the great 3. Nattatanar talks of Velur, Kidangil, Amur and Yelpattinam that were some of the towns in the Oimanadu. Of these, Yelpattinam and Kidangil were seaside towns. Ail meant a fortress wall and Pattinam meant a town. The term was especially associated with seaside towns as in Kaveri Poompattinam or Chennapattinam, which was the old name of Chennai. Nattatanar adds beautiful descriptions of the Neithal landscape as the bards passed through these towns. After Ailpattinam, the bards are shown entering the Mullai regions of Velur. The bustling town of Velur was then a forest area, very hard for us to imagine given what it is today. He then passes on to the Marutham landscape of Amur, and as I record this episode, the front page on today's The Hindu carries a news of how the Archaeological Survey of India, the Chennai Circle, is undertaking excavations at Amur, a megalithic site that was first discovered in 1931. On the banks of the lower Palar Valley, the 130-acre protected site is believed to be over 2000 years old, attesting to the antiquity of Nalliyakodan's ancient Amur. In all the 3 landscapes, the poet highlights the hospitality extended to the bards by the people and the kind of food that was served to them. Nalliyakodan himself is described as Kurinji Koman, the lord of the mountains, and his mountains are described as being as tall as the Himalayas. The poet describes the beauty of the Viraliyar, the kind of jewellery that they wore from head to toe, in very many verses which are a joy to read. And in one verse, he describes their hairstyle. Malvarai ஒழுகிய வாழை வாழை பூ என பொலிந்த ஓதி. Her lovely hairdo resembles the banana flower from the banana trees of the mountains. Now, we have seen this very line in a much earlier episode on the Dravidian connect to the Indus Valley civilization, where the very famed bronze dancing girl of the Indus Valley has the same typical hairdo. We have also seen another line from the Sirupaanatrupadai while exploring the Indus Valley. ஓங்குநிலை ஒட்டகம் துயில் மடிந்தன்ன வீங்கு திரை கொணர்ந்த விரை மர விரகின். The woods of the agil tree that were washed ashore by the waves resembled a tall sleeping camel. In the long distant past, camels should have been part of the Tamil landscape as well as the desert lands of Palai. So the poet here was probably recording a carried forward memory. In very many poignant verses, the poverty of the bards are captured, and the bard is always shown as traveling with a huge entourage of his relatives. In another interesting line, a simile is used of planets revolving around the sun, displaying the heliocentric understanding of the Tamil people way back in the 3rd century Common Era. வாழ்நிற விசும்பிற் கோள்மீன் சூழ்ந்த இளங்கதிர் ஞாயிறு எள்ளும் தோற்றத்து விலங்கு பொற்களத்தில் விரும்புவன பேணி ஆனா விருப்பின் தான் என்று ஊட்டி. Figuring what you like, he will serve you delicacies in unlimited quantities in shining golden vessels that will put to shame the blazing tender red sun surrounded by planets in the bright sky. So this was long before Copernicus put forward his heliocentric theory in the 16th century. Another line goes, பன்மீன் நடுவன் பால்மதி போல இன்னகை ஆயமோடு இருந்தோர் குறுகி. He sat in his court amidst the bards with joy like the shining moon surrounded by stars in the sky. Nattatana describes how the wise men and the warriors and other kings praised Nalliyakodan. செய் நன்றி அறிதலும் சிற்றினமின்மையும் இன்முகமுடைமையும் இனியனாதலும் செறிந்து விளங்கு சிறப்பின் அறிந்தோர் ஏத்த. The wise praise him for his sense of gratitude to those who have helped him flourish, for staying away from people with low minds, for having a kind face, and for uttering sweet words. His palace gates were always open for the bards, sings Nattatanar. He then elaborates on the gifts of precious gems and elephants and chariots that Nalliyakodan bestowed on the bards. A description goes to show the high level of craftsmanship in those days. உள்ளறக்கு எரிந்த உருக்குறு போர்வை கருந்தொழில் வினைஞர் கைவினை முற்றி. It shows how the insides of the chariot appeared red in color, having been decorated with red wax on which floral patterns had been drawn. The single poem in praise of this chieftain in the Purananuru is sung by Nannaganar, who also comes across as an important link poet, having sung a Puram poem in praise of Nalliyakodan's son, Voima Villiyadan. Purananuru poem 176 by Nannaganar goes, ஓரை ஆயத்து ஒன்தொடி மகளிர் இழுமென ஒலிக்கும் புனலம் புதவின் பெருமாவிலங்கை தலைவன் சீரியாள். In Nalliyakodan's Mavilangai with roaring water and sluices, where girls wearing bright bangles and play the ஓரை game with friends, he wears words of praise sung to him by poor men who play the small yard. இல்லோர் சொன்மலை நல்லியக்கோடனை உடையை வாழியர் புணர்ந்த பாலே. பாரி பரம்பிற் பனிசுனை தென்னீர் ஓரூர் உண்மையின் இகழ்ந்தோர் போல. He continues, like those living in Pari's mountains who took its cool springs for granted, I too took for granted Nalliyakodan's friendship. Though I was close by, I have wasted many days without getting acquainted with him. But now, having enjoyed his generosity, my heart wishes to continue seeing him. My destiny, I thank you for bringing him into my life. Nattatanar, while recording the praise of Nalliyakodan, sings, அறிவு மடம் படுதலும் அறிவு நன்கு உடைமையும் வரிசை அறிதலும் வரையாது கொடுத்தலும் பரிசில் வாழ்க்கை பரிசிலர் ஏத்த. Here, Nattatanar captures a king exhibiting humility to the core. How? அறிவு மடம் படுதலும், Nalliyakodan lowering himself before the unintelligent to match them, letting his intellect shine only in the presence of equals, giving gifts according to talents, and donating without limit. There are innumerable instances such as this, capturing the values and ideals of our forefathers, recorded for posterity in the treasure trove that we have inherited, the 2000-year-old corpus of Tamil literary works that goes by the name Sanga Ilakkiyam. We will continue looking at the socio-economic changes that happened starting around 250 Common Era that reflected the changing political dynamics of ancient Tamil Nadu in the coming episodes. Vanakkam.